You think he doesn't love you. You think he's cold, distant, emotionally unavailable. You think you're chasing someone who will never fully show up for you. And honestly, based on everything you've seen so far, that conclusion makes sense. But here's what nobody tells you. When an avoidant person actually falls in love, genuinely, deeply, uncomfortably in love, something shifts. Not loudly, not dramatically. Not the way you see in movies where someone runs through an airport and declares their feelings in front of a crowd. No, it's quieter than that. It's more subtle than that. And if you don't know what you're looking for, you will miss it entirely. You will sit right next to someone who is falling for you and think they feel nothing. That's what this is about today. We are going to talk about the real signs, the behavioral shifts, the things avoidants do when love actually breaks through their walls. Not the fantasy version, the real version. And once you understand this, you will never look at avoidant behavior the same way again. Now, let's get into it. First, you need to understand something fundamental about avoidant attachment, and I mean really understand it, not just intellectually nod at it, but feel it in your bones so it changes how you interpret everything they do. Avoidants are not cold people. They are not unfeeling. They are not incapable of love. That is one of the biggest misconceptions around avoidant attachment, and it causes so much unnecessary pain for the people who love them. The truth is, avoidants feel everything. Sometimes they feel too much. The problem isn't that they don't have emotions. The problem is that emotions feel dangerous to them. Intimacy feels dangerous. Being truly known by another person feels dangerous. And that danger response was wired into them very early in life, usually in childhood, in environments where their emotional needs were either ignored, dismissed, or punished. Think about that for a second. Imagine being a child and learning that needing someone is a threat to your safety. Imagine learning that depending on another person leads to pain. Imagine learning that the way to survive is to handle everything alone, to need nothing, to feel as little as possible. That's the blueprint an avoidant carries into every relationship they ever have. Not because they chose it, not because they're broken, but because it kept them safe once, and the nervous system doesn't forget that. So when an avoidant meets someone they genuinely connect with, when someone starts to get past those walls, when love starts to creep in, it doesn't feel good to them at first. It feels terrifying because love means vulnerability. And vulnerability means the possibility of devastation. So they pull back, they create distance, they go quiet, they minimize. And you, on the receiving end, feel rejected, confused, unwanted. But here's the thing that changes everything. That pulling back, that distance, sometimes it's not a sign they don't care. Sometimes it's a sign they care so much, it's overwhelming them. Now, I'm not saying that's always the case. I'm not giving avoidance a free pass to treat people poorly and call it love. That's not what this is. But what I am saying is that once you understand the internal experience of an avoidant, their external behavior starts to mean something different. And the behavioral changes, the specific shifts that happen when an avoidant is truly falling in love, tell a very clear story if you know how to read them. So let's go through them one by one. The first change is that they start showing up consistently, even when it's uncomfortable for them. Consistency is everything when it comes to avoidance because their default mode is inconsistency, hot and cold, present and then distant, warm and then withdrawn. That's the avoidant rhythm when they're not fully invested, when they're keeping things at a surface level, when they're managing their own anxiety by keeping you at arm's length. But when an avoidant truly loves someone, you start to see something different. You start to see them showing up even when it costs them something, even when it pushes against their instinct to retreat. They answer your texts even when they'd rather go silent. They make plans and they keep them. They don't disappear for days without explanation. They stay in the discomfort instead of running from it. This doesn't mean they become perfectly consistent overnight. It doesn't mean the pulling back stops completely, but you start to notice a pattern of effort that wasn't there before. They try even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. And for an avoidant, showing up consistently is one of the most significant things they can do, because every time they do it, they're fighting against a deeply embedded survival response. They're choosing you over their own protective withdrawal. That is not small. That is huge. The second change is that they start tolerating emotional conversations without completely shutting down. Emotional conversations are kryptonite to avoidance. The moment things get deep, the moment feelings are on the table, the moment you try to talk about the relationship or what you mean to each other or what you need, the shutters come down. They get quiet. They get dismissive. They change the subject. They get irritated. They leave the room, literally or emotionally. This is the avoidant's most reliable defense mechanism, because emotional conversations require them to be present and vulnerable at the same time. And that combination is almost unbearable for them. It's not manipulation, it's not cruelty, it's a nervous system in full protective mode. But when an avoidant is truly in love, something shifts in those conversations. They don't suddenly become emotionally fluent. They don't magically say all the right things, but they stay. They stay in the discomfort. They might be stiff. They might look like they'd rather be anywhere else. They might not say much, but they don't leave. They don't shut it down. They sit with the discomfort because they understand on some level that staying matters to you, and because you matter to them, they endure something that feels genuinely threatening just to be present with you. Watch for that. Watch for the avoidant who stays in the hard conversation even when every fiber of their being is telling them to leave. That staying is love. That discomfort they're tolerating for you is love. The third change is that they start letting you see their vulnerability, even in small ways. Avoidants are masters at presenting a certain image: self-sufficient, capable, unbothered. They don't need anyone. They've got it handled. They're fine. They're always fine. Because admitting they're not fine, admitting they're struggling, admitting they need something from you, that opens a door that feels incredibly dangerous to them. What if you walk through that door and then leave? What if you see the real them and decide it's too much? What if vulnerability leads to abandonment, just like it did when they were little? So they keep the armor on, always, with everyone, until they can't anymore. When an avoidant is truly falling for someone, cracks start to appear in that armor. Not gaping holes, not dramatic emotional outpourings, small cracks. They mention that they had a rough week. They let you see that they're stressed about something. They admit they missed you. They tell you something about their past they've never told anyone. They show you a fear, a doubt, a wound. These moments will often come quietly and without fanfare. The avoidant will say something vulnerable and then almost immediately try to take it back, or minimize it, or follow it up with a joke because the vulnerability scared them the moment it came out. But the fact that it came out at all, that's everything. That's the wall coming down one brick at a time. Don't miss those moments. Don't brush past them just because they came wrapped in casualness or followed by deflection. Those small moments of vulnerability from an avoidant are enormous. They're one of the clearest signs that they trust you, and trust is the foundation of everything for an avoidant in love. The fourth change is that their jealousy starts to surface, even though they try to hide it. Avoidants aren't typically openly jealous. Open jealousy requires admitting that you care, admitting that you could lose something, admitting that someone else matters to you, and avoidants resist all of that, so they build a very convincing facade of not caring. Oh, you're going out with your friends? Cool. You're talking to someone else? Fine. They couldn't care less. But when they're truly in love, that facade starts to crack under pressure. You'll notice it in subtle ways. They get quieter when you mention spending time with someone they feel threatened by. They ask a few more questions than usual about your plans. They seem slightly off when you've been away, even if they won't admit why. They might even make an indirect comment that reveals they were thinking about you and wondering what you were doing. They won't make a scene. They won't demand explanations. That's not how avoidants operate, but if you pay attention, you'll see the tells, because love, even in an avoidant, creates a desire to protect what they have, and that desire leaks out no matter how hard they try to contain it. The fifth change is that they start making future plans with you. Avoidants live in the present, and not in a mindful, intentional way, more in a way that avoids committing to a future where you still exist in their life, because a future with you means this is real, and real means vulnerable, and vulnerable means terrifying. So early on, avoidants are notoriously vague about the future. They don't talk about what happens next month or next year. They don't make plans beyond the immediate. They exist in a kind of relationship ambiguity that protects them from having to fully commit to something that might hurt them later. But when they're genuinely falling in love, that changes. They start saying things like, "We should do that sometime," and then actually following through. They mention something happening in 3 months and assume you'll be there. They talk about a trip or an experience and include you in it without being asked. They make reservations, they put things on the calendar, they plan. This might sound simple, but for an avoidant, it's profound. Making future plans with someone is an act of emotional investment. It means they're allowing themselves to imagine a future that includes you, and allowing themselves to want that future, which means allowing themselves to risk losing it. For an avoidant, that is courage. Real courage. The sixth change is that they prioritize your well-being even when it's inconvenient. Avoidants are by nature very self-protective. Not necessarily selfish, but oriented toward their own emotional preservation above all else. This means that when their comfort and your needs are in conflict, their comfort usually wins. Not because they don't care about you, but because their nervous system has trained them to protect themselves first, always. But love disrupts that. When an avoidant truly loves someone, there are moments they override that self-protective instinct to show up for the person they care about. They cancel their plans to be there when you need them. They push through their discomfort to do something that matters to you. They go to the thing they hate because it matters to you. They check in on you after a hard day, even though initiating emotional support isn't their strength. These moments won't be constant. The avoidant will still protect themselves a lot of the time, but you'll notice the exceptions. You'll notice the times they choose you over their own comfort. And those exceptions matter because they represent the avoidant working against their deepest programming for someone they love. The seventh change is that they start integrating you into their personal world. Avoidants are very protective of their personal space, their home, their routines, their hobbies, their inner circle of people. These are their sanctuaries, the places and things and people that feel safe, and letting someone new into those spaces feels like a threat to that safety, so they keep their world separate. They keep you over here while their real life exists over there. When love breaks through, that separation starts to dissolve. They show you their favorite places. They introduce you to their friends. They invite you into their home and actually make space for you there. They let you into their hobbies and interests. They want you to know the things that matter to them. This is the avoidant saying, without necessarily using those words, that you're becoming part of their safe world. You're becoming something they want to protect, not something they need to protect themselves from. That's a fundamental shift, and it doesn't happen unless they're genuinely falling for you. The eighth change is that they start noticing and remembering the small details about you. Here's something interesting about avoidance when they're in love. They pay attention deeply, quietly, intensely. They remember what you said 3 weeks ago. They notice when something's different about you. They pick up on your moods before you've said a word. They remember that you hate cilantro, or that you always get anxious before big meetings, or that your grandmother's birthday is coming up and you're feeling tender about it. They might not always do something overt with that information, but they carry it, and sometimes it shows up in unexpected moments. They make you something you mentioned loving once. They reference a story you told them a month ago. They check in about something you were worried about that you'd almost forgotten mentioning. This is love expressed through attention. The avoidant who's truly in love becomes a very careful observer of you because you matter to them, because understanding you has become important to them, because knowing you, even if they can't always say so out loud, is something they quietly cherish. The ninth change is that they start reaching out first. In most dynamics involving avoidance, the other person does most of the reaching out, the pursuing, the initiating, the checking in, and the avoidant responds, sometimes warmly, sometimes with minimal engagement, but rarely initiates from a genuine desire for connection. When they're in love, that starts to shift. You notice them texting first. You notice them suggesting plans instead of just agreeing to yours. You notice them calling just to hear your voice. You notice them sending you things, articles, songs, memes, things they saw that reminded them of you. They're reaching across the space they normally use to protect themselves, and they're reaching toward you. This is huge because every time an avoidant initiates connection, they're taking an emotional risk. They're opening themselves up to the possibility of rejection, and their nervous system hates that. So the fact that they do it anyway when they're in love tells you everything about how far you've gotten past their defenses. The 10th change is that their body language becomes more open and unguarded around you. We communicate so much through our bodies, and avoidants are no exception. In most interactions, especially with people they're keeping at arm's length, you'll see a certain physical guardedness, arms crossed, minimal touch, maintaining physical distance, limited eye contact, a kind of bodily withdrawal mirroring their emotional one. But watch what happens when an avoidant is in love. Their body starts telling the truth their words are still withholding. They lean in toward you without thinking about it. They touch you more freely and more tenderly. Their eye contact becomes warmer and more sustained. They relax in your presence in a way you can visibly see, their shoulders dropping, their jaw unclenching, their posture softening. They fall asleep next to you without their usual restlessness. They let you hold their hand or touch their face without stiffening. The body knows before the mind is ready to admit it. And the avoidance body, when they're truly in love, starts orienting toward you the way a plant orients toward light. They might not say the words yet, but their body is saying them constantly if you know how to listen. The 11th change is that they start trying to understand you instead of just tolerating you. There's a difference between being with someone and actually trying to know someone. Avoidants, when they aren't deeply invested, can spend a lot of time in the former. They're physically present, but not really curious, not really digging, not really trying to understand what makes you you. They're fine with a surface version of you, because going deeper means getting attached, and getting attached means getting hurt. But when love enters the picture, curiosity follows. They start asking real questions, not small talk questions. Questions about your childhood, your dreams, your fears, your beliefs, your wounds. They want to understand how you became the person you are. They want to know what goes on inside you. They push past the comfortable surface, not to overwhelm you, but because they genuinely want to know you, all of you. This is one of the most quietly beautiful signs of an avoidant in love, because curiosity about another person is vulnerability in itself. To ask is to admit you care about the answer. To want to understand someone is to admit they matter to you. And the avoidant who starts asking those deeper questions is the avoidant who's decided, somewhere below their conscious resistance, that you matter enough to risk knowing. The 12th change is that they start apologizing when they pull away. This one's subtle but really important. All avoidants pull away. That's not going to stop completely just because they're in love. The withdrawal is a deeply ingrained coping mechanism. What changes is what happens after the withdrawal. An avoidant who isn't deeply invested will pull away and either not notice the impact or not care enough to address it. They'll come back when they're ready and pick up where things left off as if nothing happened, leaving you sitting with all the confusion and hurt of the distance alone. But an avoidant who's genuinely in love starts becoming more aware of the effect their withdrawal has on you, and in those moments of awareness, they start acknowledging it. They might not fully explain the withdrawal, they might not even understand it themselves, but they say something. I know I've been distant lately. I'm sorry I went quiet. I wasn't in a great place, but I shouldn't have disappeared. They try to close the gap instead of just waiting for you to pretend it didn't happen. That acknowledgement, that attempted accountability, is a form of emotional maturity avoidants don't extend to everyone. They reserve it for the people who matter enough to warrant the discomfort of self-reflection. If you're receiving those apologies, even imperfect ones, you're one of those people. The 13th change is that they start being more honest about their struggles with intimacy itself. This is a big one. This is one of the clearest indicators that an avoidant has crossed into genuine love. They start talking about the very thing that's been the problem. They start naming it, acknowledging it, owning it, at least partially. I know I'm not the easiest person to be with. I push people away, and I don't always know why. I have a hard time with closeness sometimes, and I know that's frustrating. I'm trying to be more open, but it doesn't always come naturally to me. These statements might not seem like much, but coming from an avoidant, they're extraordinary because they require self-awareness. They require the willingness to look at their own patterns honestly. And most importantly, they require the willingness to be seen as imperfect by you, which is the very thing they've been working so hard to prevent. When an avoidant starts naming their avoidance to you, they're trusting you with the most vulnerable information about themselves. They're saying, here's my flaw. Here's my wound. Here's the thing that makes closeness hard for me. And I'm telling you anyway, because you matter enough for me to risk your judgment, because I want you to understand me, not just be frustrated by me, because I'm hoping you'll stay even though you know this now. That's love. Imperfect, shaky, halting love, but love. The 14th change is that they start making you feel safe with them, not just seeking safety from you. This one's probably the most important change of all, and it's the one that most clearly separates genuine love from anxious attachment or emotional unavailability that looks like love. In many avoidant relationships, especially when the avoidant isn't truly invested, the dynamic flows in one direction. You work hard to make them feel safe, you manage your needs carefully so you don't trigger their withdrawal, you walk on eggshells, you minimize yourself, you become smaller and quieter and less needy so they stay comfortable and don't disappear. But when an avoidant genuinely loves someone, they start to feel a responsibility for the other person's experience too. They start to think about whether you feel safe, whether you feel seen, whether you know where you stand. They start taking small steps to provide reassurance, not perfectly, not consistently, but genuinely. They check in, they communicate, they make small gestures that say, you aren't crazy for being here. This is real. I'm not going anywhere. This is the sign that tells you something fundamental has changed in how they relate to you. They've moved from a dynamic where you're the one doing all the work of keeping them comfortable to a dynamic where they're actively, if imperfectly, contributing to your sense of security too. That reciprocity, that growing sense of mutuality, is what love looks like when it starts breaking through avoidant defenses. Now, here's what I need you to sit with for a moment, because this is the part most people skip over, and it's the part that actually determines whether any of this matters. Seeing these signs in someone isn't a pass for poor treatment. Recognizing that someone loves you in an avoidant way doesn't mean you have to accept a relationship that hurts you. Understanding someone's wounds doesn't require you to bleed for them. Avoidant attachment is real. The struggles are real. The love, when it's there, is real. But your needs are also real. Your desire for consistency is real. Your need to feel loved in a way you can actually feel is real. And those things matter. The question is never just, does this avoidant love me? The question is, does the way this avoidant loves me actually work for me? Does it nourish me or deplete me? Does it give me enough to sustain me? Or am I always running on empty, waiting for the next small gesture to hold me over? Those are honest questions, uncomfortable questions, but they're the ones that matter. Because sometimes the most loving thing an avoidant can do for someone they care about is do their own work, go to therapy, understand their attachment patterns, build the capacity for the kind of closeness the other person needs. And sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself is recognize that love alone isn't enough if it doesn't come with growth and effort. Love in an avoidant doesn't get expressed the way it does in someone with secure attachment. It's quieter, it's more tentative, it comes in smaller packages and longer silences. It asks you to look closer and pay more attention. It tests your patience and your own sense of self-worth in ways secure love never would. But it's there. When it's there, it's genuinely there. And the behavioral changes we've talked about today are the evidence, not the declarations, not the grand gestures. The evidence is in the showing up even when it's hard, the staying even when everything in them wants to run, the small vulnerabilities they let slip through when they stop guarding so carefully, the way their body relaxes when you walk into the room, the way they reach for you when they thought they needed no one. There's something else I want to address because I hear this question constantly from people in relationships with avoidance, and it's a fair question. How do I know if they're changing because they love me? or if I'm just rationalizing their behavior because I love them. That's one of the most important questions you can ask yourself. And I want to give you an honest, straightforward answer. You look for patterns, not incidents. A single moment of vulnerability from an avoidant doesn't tell you much. One apology, one plan for the future, one moment where they stayed in the hard conversation. That could be a good day. It could be coincidence. It could be that they were feeling less defended than usual. You need to look at the pattern over time. Are these things happening more often? Is there a direction of movement, however slow, toward more openness and more effort? Or is it one step forward and 3 steps back forever?